writers, I just want to make you a little video to help you navigate the course as we are wrapping up week 1. I did get some questions about a few things. One of them is the journals, so we're going to go ahead and start there. Just keep in mind that as you're navigating through this 8-week course, one of the best ways to navigate it is by clicking on whichever unit that we're currently engaged in. There's only 4 units this semester. Each of them are 2 weeks long. And the first one that we're engaged in this week is Unit 1 Short Story, so I'm going to click on that one. When you click on the module, it will give you a snapshot of what's happening during that module. So you can see here with Short Story, we have discussions for week 1 and discussions for week 2. And then typically at the end of our units, we will have 3 bigger assignments that are due. One of them is the journal log on whatever unit we're doing, and then one of them is the quiz. And then the last one, of course, is submitting an essay. Keep in mind that you're only asked to complete 2 out of the 4 essays. You're going to want to scan through the units and see which ones you want to write in advance, because once it closes at the end of the unit, then you will no longer have that as an option for an essay. So again, check out the prompts and see what you're interested in, whether it's short story or poetry, drama, or our last unit, which is on mythology, The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. So to get back to week 2 and week 1 and week 2 for the unit that we're currently on, these are the discussions that you'll be doing. Each of the discussions is asking you to complete a series of tasks. Typically, there's going to be a reading and then a discussion. And in between there is where you'll be taking notes in your journal. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the journals to clarify things for us here. So I'm going to click on the journal assignment. So for every unit, you're going to be asked to make a journal for that unit. And the journal consists of golden lines or quotes that you're pulling from the readings. And so there's different options for which readings you can do in your journal. But typically the journals are all the same. The journal entries contain 3 parts. For each time you do a journal log, Part 1 is you're going to share a quote from the reading and you're going to cite it in MLA format. Part 2 is you're going to connect the quote to the concepts of story or the concepts for the unit that we're on. For story, it would be things like symbol, plot, character, setting, tone, those kinds of things. And then the last part, part 3, is where you're going to explain why you picked the quote that you picked or what it means to you. And so here we have a sample log for a journal. We've got part 1. We have the quote from Kate Chopin's Story of an Hour here, and it's cited in MLA with the author's last name, Chopin, and the page number. We have part 2, which is connecting the quote that you picked to the concepts, the literary concepts. This one talks about the tone of the story and the characters. And then the last part is just making your own little personal connection. Why did that quote stand out to you, or why did you pick it, or what did you learn from it? What was significant about it? If you're wanting to see a larger sample, an actual complete sample of an entire journal log for short story, you can click on the unit and it will pop up here. It might take a little to pop up in the video because it's actually trying to connect that document. But the important thing to remember is that each journal entry will have 3 parts, and that you'll submit it in the journal folder at the end of the unit. And so that's kind of one little snapshot. The other thing I wanted to go over is the difference between your own physical journal and a digital journal. So when you're turning in your journal entries for points, for grading, that's going to be your digital journal. But I also want you to keep your own physical journal so you can take notes in. And so we're going to go a little bit over that. So I've just shifted back a little bit, back to clicking on modules, which will get you to this page. And just as a side note, you can collapse the weeks so that you can take away some of the bulkiness of the module and just start on the one that you're actually on. One of the pages that's on Unit 1 Short Stories is a page that talks a little bit about the journals and the expectation for writing in this class. So again, there's 2 types of journals. One of them is your digital journal, which you will record your quotes in MLA format, connecting them to literary concepts. That's going to help you when you're going to write your essay or take the quiz, because you're going to be practicing the vocabulary and literary terms, and also engaging in MLA format So that way when you go to write your essay, you can use the quotes that you've already selected in your analysis for your essay. So the digital journal is the one that's graded, but I also want you to keep a physical journal, and it can be any journal. I often use, I have tons of journals. You can use one that's spiral bound. And with your personal journal for the class, you're going to be taking notes, writing down things that stand out to you. But using that physical journal just helps on the fly when you're actually reading the digital version of the documents, or if you've printed them out when you're reading the documents. And so that's why you're going to want to have two different journals. One is, to submit for a grade that's formatted in a digital document. And the other one is just a place where you can get messy and play and have fun with exploring some ideas. You can do free writes in there. And that's going to help you with just analyzing the material and making those connections. So I just wanted to move you over to the second discussion for week 2, because I want to show you what I'm talking about when I mention the literary concepts or the vocabulary for our unit. So for every single unit, we have a reading packet that's going to give you some information about that particular genre. So because our first unit is short story, you're going to be looking at the short story packet to kind of help you understand what are stories. And so this packet's going to go over just kind of a little history of stories, storytelling, something that we're all familiar with because we've had stories in our lives our whole life. And so this packet is going to be really helpful for you to understand what does it mean when we say short story, right? We have here short stories are nothing more than the tales told by men and women who have studied the art of telling, refined it through a long practice, and adapted it to the demands of sophisticated reading as opposed to listening audience. And so in this packet, I would recommend that you print it out and then highlight all of the concepts and terms like point of view, narrator, first-person narrator versus third-person narrator, what an unreliable narrator is. And as you're engaging in the vocabulary, you're going to start seeing that in the actual short stories that we're reading, and that's really helpful. And so this is what you're going to be using for your journal in part 2 when I'm asking you to connect the quote that you picked to literary concepts. So maybe you pick a quote where it gives you a sense of a character and the different kinds of characters we have. So is the character that you're quoting from the protagonist? Is it the main character? Or is it the antagonist? Is it the person that is bugging the main character or causing a problem for the main character? And so that's where you're going to make those connections in the journal to the concepts, whether it's plot or is there a flashback in the story, or is there a complication or conflict? So we're looking at the concepts and then really looking at the story to see, where do we see these playing out in the actual story? So again, for your journal and note-taking, what I want you to do is I want you to trust your intuition and take notes based on the things that seem interesting or important to you. And so maybe in the story of an hour, you're fascinated by the protagonist and you want to kind of see what's happening with that particular character. And you want to think about what is the symbolism behind what's happening, what's the setting behind what's happening with that character. And you can just choose to explore those in your journal. And so I'm just going to scroll down here to the first story. That is the story of an hour. So you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. So the story opens with this paragraph here. It says, knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. So this is the immediate opening of the story, right? This is the way that we are introduced to this character who is called Mrs. Mallard. And then in the second paragraph, it says, it was her sister Josephine who told her in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken time to reassure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. So here, just in the first 2 paragraphs of our of our story, we've been introduced to 4 different characters. We have our protagonist, who is Mrs. Mallard. We have her sister, Josephine. We have her husband's co-worker, Richards. And then we have Brentley Mallard's name as on the list of killed in the railroad accident. And so what is this setting, right? We are being introduced to this conflict of trying to break the news to Miss Mallard, who's afflicted with heart trouble about her husband's death on the railroad accident. And so those are the, when we're analyzing literature, we just want to take it nice and slow, and we just want to think about, why is the story being told in this way? Why does it open up immediately with us knowing that Miss Mallard is afflicted with heart trouble? How does that kind of shape that reader's view of what's happening? Maybe it makes us worried about her. Maybe it makes us think she's going to have some anxiety over this news. And so my advice to you is in your note taking is you don't have to write everything down. Just really follow your intuition. You can cluster, meaning you can write something in the center of your page. You can build off of that. You can make a list of ideas. If you notice, oh, this is setting, you can write down setting, Miss Mallard's house or whatever. But really just, you don't have to take notes like, you don't have to, it's not about how many notes you take, it's about the quality of your notes. So that's my advice. Have fun and just practice and play and see what happens. You'll notice that after week 2, when you've already done a quiz, when you've already done a journal log entry for short story, the subsequent or the later entries and quizzes will get easier because you'll kind of get into the rhythm of what's expected of you. So have fun and take care.